hour. Super. Okay, so hi everybody. On behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, I want to thank you for joining us for NDCF by CPST. This is going to be our chance to review the NDCF data that's been submitted by CPSTs in the field. But we're also going to be taking a look at the data tools that are available and how these can be leveraged in a lot of ways, such as for educational outreach, for reporting, for grant funding. And we'll also learn how the data the NDCF provides does even more than the basics of just identifying the areas of misuse and where we can communicate more. There are just a lot of other ways that it can be used. And I'm Denise Donaldson, and I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm the CPS advocate representative on the National Child Passenger Safety Board, and I'm the board's current chair of the data committee. I'm also the owner of Safe Ride News, the publisher of the Latch Manual, as well as the director of Car Safe Kids, a community CPS program that works in the Seattle area. And we use the NDCF for my program. So we've planned time for your questions to be answered at the end of this presentation. So as we go along, if you have a question, be sure to type that into the Q&A box. So in other words, not the chat box, put it into the Q&A box. Just as a reminder, attendees are requested to not participate in this webinar if you're operating a motor vehicle. So the webinar is going to be recorded. You can listen to it safely when you arrive at your destination. Please don't listen while you're driving. The recording will be posted to cpsboard.org/recertification within 1 to 2 business days. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, the presentation qualifies for 1 CEU or continuing education unit, and also for 1 community ed credit. So attendance on this webinar is required for at least 45 minutes to get that 1 CEU. And then if you stay for the whole 90 minutes, you'll also receive the 1 community ed credit. So in other words, this NDCF by CPST festival provides it all. And proof of attendance will be emailed to you 24 hours after the webinar. So we're calling today's webinar a festival because it's a celebration, right? The National CPS Board would like to congratulate and celebrate the child passenger safety techs for hitting the 100K mark with the NDCF. Using the National Digital Car Seat Check Form, your programs now in your program and even in your state and the overall field has been benefited by documenting and sharing all the life-saving work that you do. And with each of the checks you complete, the CPS field learns more about what's happening right now in our field. And that's all thanks to your effort. So we really appreciate it. A great big thank you for contributing to this 100K landmark achievement. And as we all know, that means 100,000 children are riding safer on our nation's roadways because of our work in communities. And you're showing your work using the NDCF and you're able to see your impact. So thank you to all, whether you're just starting to test out the NDCF waters right now, or if, as we say, you have already cannonballed in. So first, we're going to take a minute to watch a celebration video that Jennifer Bogue, the NDCF field training coordinator, developed, and we'll get this NDCF by CPS festival started. So let's hit that. Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, so let's move on to the presentation portion of this festival. But of course, if you want to keep dancing, go for it. We're lucky today to have 2 great presenters. We have Adele Polson and Jennifer Hacker. So Adele is a senior study director with Westat, a research firm based in Washington, D.C. She's been a transportation researcher with Westat for 24 years. Adele, along with other WestStat staff, which that's hard to say, WestStat staff, is a CPST, and she joined the NDCF team almost 4 years ago. While she's managed many projects for WestStat, she's most proud of her team's work on the NDCF and everything the program is doing to help keep children safe. So that's awesome. And Jennifer Hacker manages Region 6 in Indiana as a child passenger safety specialist with the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute. She's been a child passenger safety technician instructor since 2007. The presenters and other panelists will be happy to answer your questions, as I mentioned. So again, please remember, put those in the Q&A box, and then we'll go over those when the presentation's over. So Adele, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Denise, and thank you all for coming today, all 157 of you, it looks like. So thank you very much, we appreciate it. Next slide, please. Before I jump into the presentation, I'd like to thank all of my colleagues and also our program partners. The NDCF is a very collaborative initiative, and I wouldn't be here today presenting all of this great information without the support of the AAA Mountain West Group, the National Safety Council, and of course, the statisticians that work with me at WestStat. So thank you to everyone. My goal today is to quickly review the NDCF background, provide you with details on the coverage and the context of the NDCF data, and then to review the results of our in-depth analysis, and finally share resources you can use for your programs. So before we jump into all the data details, which is my favorite part, we're going to go ahead and give you some background on the big picture of the NDCF. The NDCF provides one national standardized data collection tool that's freely available to all U.S. certified child passenger safety technicians and instructors. As we all know, CPS programs conduct car seat checks through a variety of settings, including virtually. What's more, the NDCF collects and stores that seat check data so it can be accessed by technicians as well as program managers. For a technician, the NDCF can be used to document the time spent conducting CPS activities, identify the most commonly used seats or vehicles in your area, and track how many seats you have checked in your CPS career. The seat check data can also be used to monitor trends, seat distribution, and issues encountered in the field. Then this data can be leveraged to enhance and change the way that we provide outreach and educate families. So how do we take all of these car seat checks and transform them into usable data to help you all in your programs? The data are professionally cleaned, they're analyzed by our very specially trained statisticians, and then they are finally presented in data dashboards. As with any data set, before data analysis occurs, we take several steps to clean the data. These steps create a data file that's ready to be fed into statistical software programs. We always maintain a raw version of the data that is always available to you, the users. That data never goes away and it is not altered. Through the cleaning and preparation, WestStat creates an additional or a second clean data file. And this process simply enhances the data. We get a lot of questions about what cleaning means. So we like to say that it's a lot like cleaning a room. We don't change anything. We just make sure that everything is neat and tidy and in the right place. For example, if you're cleaning your house, maybe you know that all the books go on the bookshelf. So no matter where you are in the house, if you find a book, you put it back in the bookshelf. In the NDCF, we sometimes find that techs use the other fields to record information. For example, someone will mark other for the type of car seat on arrival, and then write in the open text notes that it's a 3-in-1 seat being used forward facing with harnesses. That information is kind of in the wrong place. So we move it to the correct field and we mark the car seat type on arrival to forward facing with harness. And that's what we mean when we're saying we are cleaning the data. We also create some new variables just to make the data easier to analyze. Most importantly, and my statisticians always want to make sure I make this point to all of the users, if we are ever unsure about what a record means, so kind of like you're cleaning your house and you find some item and you're really not sure where to put it, we leave it. We leave that data alone. We know that you are the ones in the fields. You are the ones out there collecting this data and working with these families. So if there's ever any doubt, we always err on the side of trusting what you have entered into the system. Once the data are clean, we undertake analysis. Today, just before this call, we released all of the data through November 2022. In total, we have over 107,000 car seat checks. And I know Denise congratulated you, and I have to say congratulations again. This is so impressive. And as we add in additional data, we continue to monitor trends. We are still seeing that most of our car seat checks are done for infants or unborn children. And the most common type of car seat is the rear-facing only seat. So once all the analysis is done, it is fed into the data dashboards. These dashboards consolidate all of the results and feed them into various charts, graphs, and maps. This display of the data, as opposed to using standard tables filled with a ton of numbers, is to help consolidate multiple findings into a few summary outputs that are easy to understand. The dashboards are built to display key findings in a more user-friendly format that with the idea of making the data more useful for everyone. We aim to make trends easier to identify and overall snapshots easier to understand. Our dashboards follow the tiered access system so that users have access to a national level dashboard with all the checks through November 2022. Technicians that have personally conducted seat checks will also have their own personal dashboard with just the car seat checks they have conducted. State coordinators will have a dashboard for all of the checks that have been conducted within their state, and so on and so on. So that's the normal data processing we conduct each month. Today, I'm going to dive deeper into understanding the NDCF data. We're going to discuss coverage and representativeness of the data, and then we're also going to compare the NDCF data set to national data sets to help us understand how to interpret all of our NDCF findings. So a little bit of a statistics lesson for everybody. You know, in an ideal world, we would look at all the data that tells us about what's happening with all the children in all the vehicles all across the US, right? It'd be really great to give us details on what kinds of restraints the children are all riding in, what kind of misuse we see, so that we can figure out how to help more children. But all of these children across the US, that's called our population, or the entire group of what we're really interested in. Unfortunately, it's logistically impossible to get information on all of the children all across the US traveling in vehicles. The NDCF data is great because there's a lot of it, 107,000 records as a matter of fact, and it also has very detailed information about what we're seeing with those 107,000 car seat checks. But we have to remember that it doesn't cover all of the kids traveling in all vehicles. So let me give you another analogy. Let's say we wanted to know what everyone's favorite Disney World park is, right? Our population here is everybody that has ever visited Disney World. But of course, like all the kids in the cars, it's nearly impossible to reach out and talk to all the people that have ever gone to Disney World. So there's lots of different ways that we could survey them. But let's say we decide to stand in front of Epcot and ask people, what's your favorite Disney park? We'll probably still get all sorts of answers, but we're more likely to talk to people who like Epcot because we're at Epcot. That doesn't mean our information is bad, but we have to keep that in mind when we look at and use our data. So whenever we discuss the NDCF, it's important to recognize that it doesn't represent all the children, all the car seats, or all the vehicles in the entire US. It is a sample. Data from the NDCF only really accurately describes children that attend car seat checks where the NDCF is used. As I mentioned earlier, it's also heavily overrepresented by infants in rear-facing only seats. Looking quickly at the geographic coverage, we can see that we do have seats in every state, which is great. It's amazing. But you can also see that Indiana is accounting for about 25% of our checks. So those car seats aren't distributed evenly across the whole US. So to understand how well the NDCF represents all of the children in the United States, we use the American Community Survey. The ACS is the premier source for detailed population and housing information about our nation, and it is provided by the US Census Bureau. And my statistical colleagues get to work with this data all the time. So they compared the counties with NDCF data to all counties in the United States. And they did this in two different ways. They weighted the counties by their populations so that more populous counties had more influence on the final number. And then they also weighted it by counties by the number of NDCF records, so that counties with more checks had more influence on the final numbers. And here are the results of that analysis. So while this table contains a lot of numbers, the bottom line is that the NDCF seems to have reasonable population representation. That is, the counties we're covering seem to be on average like the whole US on the variables we looked at. So on population, income, a number of children, race, and households with vehicles. The counties in the NDCF include about 80% of the US population. There are some differences, but there's nothing that's very concerning. So this is very promising, as it means there's definitely the potential to eventually model our data to produce national estimates, so that the data we talk about out of the NDCF does represent all of the children in the US. Based on this analysis, we can report that the NDCF is not statistically or systematically undercovering or overcovering counties with a lot of children. So although the NDCF is showing promise for becoming nationally representative, we're not quite there yet. So next, we compared the NDCF data to a study of children that we know is nationally representative, and that is the National Survey of the Use of Booster Seats, or NSUBS. NSUBS is the only probability-based nationwide child restraint use survey. The survey provides an estimate of child restraint use through observations and interviews. Data collectors visit more than 400 daycare centers, fast food restaurants, gas stations, and recreational centers in 30 different counties across the US. They observe restraint use for thousands of children in thousands of vehicles, and then conduct brief interviews with the drivers or other adults to determine age, height, weight, race, and ethnicity of all the child occupants. This data determines the extent to which children are prematurely transitioned out of restraints, and also tells us how such restraint use varies across geographic and demographic groups. So we compared the child restraint use type on arrival by age category between the NDCF and the 2019 NSUBS data. The analysis shows us that the NDCF does in fact observe more safety conscious parents, right? We kind of suspected that because safety conscious parents go out of their way to find CPS programs, book appointments, and go to these car seat checks. And now the data is backing that up. A greater percentage of NDCF infants, so those are children less than 1 year old, were traveling in rear facing seats. That's 98% of the NDCF kids were in rear facing seats versus only 92% under NSUBS. Children in the NDCF seem to be kept rear facing longer, with 56% of the children 1 to 3 in rear facing in the NDCF versus just the 17% in NSUBS. Among our 4 to 7 year olds, a higher percentage of NDCF children are still forward facing harness seats with 53% versus just that 36% for NSUBS. So on the current national dashboard, we can see that the misuse rate is 63% for postnatal checks. This means that among all car seat checks with children, 63% arrive at the seat check with at least one misuse. We've heard from many users that they are concerned that this is lower than other national estimates or other studies of car seat misuse. And we understand and we do agree. That is likely because the caregivers at car seat checks are more aware of safety resources. So it's imperative to always keep in mind that for right now, the misuse rates only apply to seats checked via the NDCF. So while we're working to amass data, more data, what can you do with what we have now? How can you use this data effectively? It is completely valid and informative to look at age and car seat type categories Comparing percentages within the NDCF still provides us with valuable insights into the differences between seat types and ages. Carefully formulate your questions based on the understanding that the data is most reliable as it relates to seat checks, rather than trying to generalize to the entire population, right? This data is much more informative about the seats and the seat checks you are conducting, as opposed to all of the people in your county, in your state, or across the country. In the next slides, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean and review research questions that can be answered using the NDCF data. So we worked with our partners at NSC and AAA Mountain West Group and brainstormed to develop the most useful questions to ask that would allow us to create an impactful outreach campaign. And here's what we came up with. This certainly is not exhaustive by any means, but these are the questions we looked at. What are the top misuse by child restraint use type? Because we're thinking, you know, if you're a car seat technician, it might be helpful to know, well, most people with a rear facing seat have these types of misuses. Let me focus on that and make sure I educate the parents about these top misuses, right? What child restraints are most children using at each age? Are children who are only in seatbelts actually properly restrained? Are parents bringing older children to seat checks? For the in-depth analysis, Westet reviewed the data from just 73,000 of our seat checks that were captured in the NDCF from July 2018 through March 2022. Again, all of these results apply to caregivers, car seats, and vehicles that have had their seats checked via the NDCF. So this chart provides the answer to our first question. What are the top misuses overall by restraint type? We looked at all the misuse rates within the different car seat type categories of the NDCF. Consistently, the #1 misuse involves some type of issue with properly using the seatbelt for installing the car seat or securing the child. Seatbelt misuse includes loose installations, seatbelts and lower anchors used together, lock-off misuse, twisted seatbelts, incorrectly ratcheted belts, and for our older children and booster age children that are only using the seatbelt, that can include an incorrect belt fit. This means that overall, caregivers are better at installing with the latch compared to the seatbelt. As you can see, the latch misuse are lower across all the car seat types. And looking at our total checks column, we see again that the NDCF still sees a majority of rear-facing seat, with over 45,000 of the 70,000 seats being rear-facing. Now let's look into the specifics of misuse for each seat type. We'll start with the rear-facing only seats. On this slide, we have these 3 tables. There is a table for seatbelt misuse, the middle table for lower anchor misuse, and that far right table for harness misuse. Each table then contains the details on that misuse, listing the subcategories with the % of misuse for each seat feature, right? So this is this great detail that the NDCF provides. For both installation methods, the most common misuses are overwhelmingly that the install is too loose. And the second most is that the latch and the seatbelt are used together. For the harness, they are also most often too loose, followed by the chest clip at the wrong location and the incorrect harness slot. Next, we look at the same details, but for rear-facing convertible seats. Unsurprisingly, we see very similar patterns to those rear-facing only seats, right? We have the same top installation misuses, too loose, and those lower anchors and seatbelts being used together. For the harnesses, we see the same top 3 misuses, but the incorrect harness slot is slightly more common for our rear-facing convertibles. It also seems like caregivers are more likely to get the chest clip at the correct location for the convertibles compared to the rear-facing only. Looking at our forward-facing seats compared to the rear-facing seats, we see the same top 3 installation errors for seatbelt, lower anchor, and harnesses. However, we are seeing higher misuse rates for forward-facing seats compared to the rear-facing seats. When the seat is installed using a seatbelt, the forward-facing seats are too loose nearly 40% of the time, compared to just 31% for our rear-facing convertibles. Harness misuse is also higher than in rear-facing seats, with harnesses loose in 38% of the checks compared to just 25% of the rear-facing checks. Looking at tether misuse for this first time, we see that tether non-use is by far the most common type of misuse. For booster seats, only seatbelt use makes sense to report. We know that boosters can be installed with lower anchors and things like that, but those are very small percentage of our overall seats, so that's not reliable data. So we're just looking at seatbelt misuse for the boosters. We see that nearly 30% of the children in booster seats have seatbelt fit issues, and the routing is incorrect in about 12% of the cases. Other seatbelt misuse here is frequently when the child has the belt behind their back rather than across their chest. Now, finally, for our few children that arrive in seatbelt only, more than 41% of them do not fit correctly in the lap shoulder belt. Okay, next, we wanted to see what type of car seat is being used by children at each age. We see that children are generally seem to be in the correct seats for their age groups, which is encouraging. And the reference we used for this was the NDCF recommendations for car seat by age. For example, we have 99% of children less than 1 using our rear-facing seats. For children ages 2 to 3, 94% were either in rear-facing or forward-facing seats. And that continues to a lesser extent as we look at older children. For example, 61% of children ages 8 to 9 are in boosters or in forward-facing seats. Next, we wanted to look at how many children arriving at seat checks were improperly in a seatbelt. That is, what percent of these children should really still be in boosters or another CRS. We have 2 main ways to examine that in the NDCF data. That's what I love about this NDCF data. It's so detailed. First, we can compare car seat type on arrival with on departure. The logic being, if a child comes in a seatbelt but leaves in a booster, we can assume that the technician judged the child was not ready for the seatbelt only. This table shows us that out of 1,400 children who arrived in a lap shoulder belt, only 6% of those children left in just a seatbelt. The other 94% left in some type of car seat, suggesting that they still needed a CRS. Secondly, we look at the direct question, was the child correctly secured in the seatbelt? Again, we see that the majority of children arriving at the in a seatbelt do not fit the seatbelt properly. So we know that we see a majority of infants at NDCF checks, but Denise Donaldson challenged us to take a look at the percent of vehicles that are showing up with only older children. Or in other words, her real question is, are parents of older children still attending seat checks, or are those older children that we're seeing and that we're checking just incidental because they happen to arrive with their younger siblings? There are a couple different ways to look at this using the NDCF data. First, we simply examined the percentage of vehicles that arrive at a seat check with only a booster seat, and that is only 2.1% of our cases. Then we got a little bit fancier with this chart here, and it looks at the number of children in the vehicle and the percent of the children in each age group. So the darker colors represent our older children. So you can quickly just look at this chart and overall see that we don't have a lot of older children. Across the bottom of the chart, you can see the number of children in the vehicle. So over on the left-hand side, we just have 1 child in the vehicle all the way up to 4+. So we can see in the chart that when there's only 1 child in the vehicle, this first bar over here on the left, so with only 1 child in the vehicle, about 70% of those children are less than 1 year old, or it's a prenatal check. When you add in the 2-year-old, 82% of the checks when there is a single child in the vehicle are for children ages 2 and younger. In comparison, only about 1% of those single child checks were for children ages 7 and older. When there are 4 or more children in the vehicle, about 18% of those checks are performed on children ages 7 and older. Looking at the vehicle level, nearly 70% of the vehicles with multiple children had at least one child who was unborn or less than 2 years old, right? So about 70% of the time, people are coming in because they have those younger children. This is strong evidence that we are mostly seeing older children who are in the vehicle with their younger siblings, and very rarely seeing older children only at seat checks. So now that we answered all of those questions with reliable NDCF data, what can we do with it? We were very lucky to work with the AAA Mountain West Group and NSC to develop a social media campaign using these results. You'll notice that my next several slides have a different template, and that is because they were generously provided by Angela Knudsen from AAA Mountain West Group. As I mentioned earlier, it is very important to provide context to the NDCF data. In order to clarify our messaging, we needed to understand the big picture of Americans' perceptions of child passenger safety. So we worked with Ipsos to field a nationally representative survey back in 2021. Only 21% of caregivers have visited a seat check, but still most respondents were confident their seat was installed properly. As noted earlier, claiming the NDCF represents all the children in the US is not accurate. However, by clearly qualifying this in the social media image, we correctly convey the impactful message that more than 56% of the seats were misused, right? So you see in our tile here, 56% of car seats inspected by child passenger safety technicians are improperly installed. So we just qualified that. We didn't say nationally 56%, we said those checked by technicians. As noted in our earlier results, caregivers are less likely to seek car seat inspections as children grow. This leads to the concerning fact that about 76% of forward-facing seats are incorrectly installed. So again, that is the highest misuse across the different types of car seats. Again, we are seeing issues with older children. 90% of the children in a lap shoulder belt only should still be in some type of car seat. AAA Mountain West Group is generously sharing these assets with the CPS community. These 4 assets, along with 4 others, are available in English and Spanish on the car seat check, the National Car Seat. Wow, let me just start that one again. On the board's webpage at cpsboard.org. Fact sheets and key messages are also provided. Other resources for the NDCF are constantly evolving, expanding, and improving. So this is a shout out for Jennifer. Please be sure to regularly check the NDCF page on the board's website for the latest updates and resources. We have user guides, links to webinars, and tutorial videos. And let's not forget one of our most important resources for the NDCF program, and that is all of you, the techs out there in the field collecting our data. We are using the NDCF data in new and exciting ways. Never before have you been actively feeding data into a national system. Never before have the data been analyzed and presented on this scale. Basically, you technicians are taking on a new job. First and foremost, you are car seat technicians, and your primary concern is for educating families and making sure the children are safe. And you are also using the NDCF to document those checks. However, now you are also our data collectors. The completeness and the accuracy of your data entry into the NDCF is critical. As the program expands and our analysis becomes more generalizable, we are counting on you to continue to provide us with quality data. So if you want to benefit from this free resource and have a chance to work with your data, first, if you don't already have the NDCF account, please register for one at carseatcheckform.org. Start using the form as you conduct your seat checks. Then review all those resources I just mentioned on the NDCF page of the National CPS Board website. The best way to understand all of the data that is available and to start to see the full story of what is happening at C-Checks is to review the dashboards. Click around and try out different options. You can't break it or delete anything, so feel free to experiment as much as you like. Even if you haven't done any NDCF checks yet, you can still see our national dashboard. And then please give us your feedback. Please click on the Contact Us link at thecarseatcheckform.org. Thank you so much for your time today. Myself and the entire NDCF program team look forward to working with you. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with any of your questions.
Thanks so much, Adele. We're going to transition over to Jennifer now, so get her slides going.
I am working on that now. Okay, I think it should be up.
Looks good.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi, my name is Jennifer Hacker. I work with the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute in Indiana. I have been a child passenger safety technician since 2004 and an instructor since 2007. So here in Indiana, we have worked with the NDCF for quite some time. So we are going to discuss that and how we are using the data from the NDCF. Also, we're going to talk about how we support technicians, supporting other communities, some inventory management, and some funding for stations and distributions next steps. I know that we're just set up on Q&A, but that's okay. I have a little Jeopardy session set up here, so we will use just the Q&A section for that. Just so you know, just a little fun fact that I forgot to share was in a 2-year recertification cycle, I had over 200 teaching hours. So that's just a fun fact. I've been out there in the field for quite some time, so I'm just excited to really share some of this information with you. Okay, so who wants to be a millionaire? I said Jeopardy, but this is just NDCF focused. So just some of this data is a little older just because it was from our presentation back in August, but we just are going to go over some child passenger safety crash facts. This obviously has changed now, but how many C-Checks are currently in the NDCF? So this may be a little older than it once was, but go ahead and submit your questions. Okay. So that answer is 103,000 car seat checks are currently in the NDCF. Adele already mentioned that Indiana has about 25,000 seat checks in the NDCF. Like we have been using the NDCF since its origination, so we have been using it for quite some time. Okay, what is the current national misuse rate that is reported on the NDCF? We have 80%, 70%, 63, or 50. Like I said, we pulled this back in August, so this may be different than what Adele just presented on, but that is 63%. What age group represents the highest number of children injured in the motor vehicle crashes in Indiana annually? So this is something that we are trying to focus on in Indiana because it is 8 to 12. So for those people that are in the other states, definitely look at that and trying to really focus on those age groups that are not that birth to 1 that we're usually seeing for those car seat checks. How many inspections? I just answered this. We are that 27,000 plus mark. So this is where we're at here. So primary goal as a child passenger safety program, we have each child properly restrained in a vehicle, in a booster seat, or vehicle seatbelt. So that also falls into what the state highway safety offices have planned into their programming as well. So they want to work to increase their regional numbers of fitting stations, facilitate child passenger safety retention, conduct annual site visits. They manage car seat, monitor for accurate data, reporting using the NDCF, and participate in whole community events. So like I said, Indiana began using the NDCF for the data entry and collection in 2018 and was one of the first states to enroll in the program. We manage that by making sure that all of our permanent fitting stations who do this has to use the NDCF to receive funding from the state office. We maintain about 12,000 or 1,200 registered child passenger safety technicians in the state, and using the NDCF has greatly increased the productivity, performance, community engagement for technicians across Indiana, because we can see what somebody else is doing. As everybody talks about, impact of COVID-19 definitely has kicked our numbers, decreased as a lot of people have, but in 2019 we still distributed over 4,400 seats. However, that decreased to 2,600 in 2020. So that has definitely made a change in that. We still have continued to increase back from that. We are definitely still not where we were back in 2019, but we are getting closer. Technician recertification rates are usually about 6% above national average pre-pandemic, or during the pandemic, sorry. And that motivated for the higher demand of the digital forms. I don't know how many other state coordinators I have on the call, but technician recertification is definitely being hard hit. Some of those people that got recertified during the pandemic are no longer invested or interested in maintaining their certification. We are definitely seeing that in Indiana. This is just a small table of seat checks, seat checks in 2018, through 2022. So you can see that big, so in 2018, this was our 2,000, this was just our trial run where we only had 2,800 seats entered into the data. And then in 2019, this is when we mandated that all of our permanent fitting stations go to the NDCF, and we had 7,709 seats inputted into the NDCF. And you can see where we had that drop from COVID, but now we are definitely on the increase. All 2020 data from data was collected from the National Digital Checkup Form website, and like I said, over 6,630 seat checks were conducted. It did serve all the Indiana counties, including some out of state, so either from Kentucky, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois. Maybe we've checked those seats as well. And in 2022, about 3,800 car seats were distributed. A national perspective on all seats conducted, I'm so sorry. And you can see Indiana is still a leader, but we don't want to be. We want to have these other states definitely use the NDCF to its full potential. That is one of the reasons I believe that Indiana has been on this call, is because we definitely want these other states to be able to maybe enforce the use of the NDCF through their government agency. Just a short break here of NHTSA regions. What Indiana is located in Region 5. So you might be in Region 9, but definitely contact your local NHTSA region, and they can also help you maybe do this NDCF rollout for your permanent fitting stations or fitting stations. Also, something Indiana has is the Child Passenger Safety Specialist Program. They have these roles of technician monitoring and outreach. They also establish additional permanent fitting stations, attend each child passenger safety course in the region to help make the connection, They make initial contact with the tech at the course completion. Also, they conduct site monitoring annually. They serve as technical support for the NDCF to hopefully help so Joe does not get so many emails. But we do try to do some just basic technical support with that. This is just a kind of an overview of Region 5 child passenger safety numbers. As you can see in the region, we do have the second most, with Illinois passing us here recently. So just an overview of where we stand. Stations and registered technicians. We are going to be first to admit that this is where we are trying to improve upon, because we have 142 stations across Indiana and we have almost 1,200 technicians. However, we do not have that many registered users in the NDCF. We might just have one person from the fitting station set up to use. So we are just wanting to increase that as well. Okay, so the introduction to the NDCF. Adele did a great job explaining this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just kind of how we use this. So we do it based off of the national, we use it for distribution. So this is just what every state kind of has to go by, just a kind of a basis that each state has to demonstrate an active network of child passenger safety inspection stations and/or inspection events based on the state's identification problems. And also another goal is to maintain for recruiting, training, and maintaining a sufficient number of child passenger safety technicians based on the state's problem identification. So inventory management. This is how Indiana manages the inventory with using the NDCF. So it aids technicians to resupply fitting stations without additional surveys, grant applications, reimbursement process. We just pull this NDCF data and then go from there on how to restock that permanent fitting station. As you can see, these are our 2022 numbers. And so we are definitely, like most states, we do have this big jump in that summer, late summer, early fall months of getting those car seats inspected. So using the data to replenish resources and more, like I said, we identify top performing permanent fitting stations within Indiana. So this allows for quicker turnover for car seat orders. It also reflects the types of car seats in high demand by families. It highlights monthly distribution and peak activity during the community events. So warmer months, spring, summer, back to school. Also demographically pinpoints areas that with increased need. So we can see that maybe our Indianapolis metro are needing more seats versus some of our southern regions. Some car seat distribution, just a little bit more about that. So in 2022, most frequently distributed was rear facing convertible. So 1,200 seats rear facing convertible. We also distributed almost 1,100 infant seats. And how we know that this was state distribution is we make sure that if it's information or seats provided by us, they have to choose state funds. So that is part of our education that we provide to our fitting stations, is that it has to be state funds. Just a little bit more about funding for distribution. So in Indiana, we have also a lot of hospital foundations that provide seats. This is how we break down. So we can still see that our funding, just in case they were to lose some of those other funding sources, then they would be able to, this is part of our grant justification of how we need to keep up our money as well. Indiana has fitting stations in 67 over 92 counties. We've increased focus on creating more fitting stations for at-risk or underserved locations. Also, we've increased focus on rural counties. So some of those rural counties that are hard to get in, and maybe working with local fire departments, local EMS, those areas. We also have a fitting station in a mental health organization. So we are able to make sure we're hitting everybody that needs served. Also, the majority exist in the northern region with fewer resources, and by raising education standards, it'll overall increase our car seat safety use. So moving forward, we hope that we are going to increase education and training programs for the child passenger safety. We're going to also improve our data quality, making sure our permanent fitting stations are really putting in their correct data, hopefully helping Adele and her team by having cleaner data and making sure that the cleaning of the house is a little easier. Also, movement from paper forms to digital at the time of inspection. That's something that Indiana, we cannot get rid of those paper forms. We always want to use the paper forms versus just putting it in digitally at the time of the inspection, which would definitely help for a backlog and maybe some more up-to-date information. Also, we provide more services to at-risk areas, so more fitting stations for areas with high injury rates, educate on proper seat types and uses for different child age groups. Also strive to lower the child fatality rate. Some improvement, we definitely need to make some improvement here in Indiana on retention rate of technicians. We are, like I said, struggling with some of those technicians that got certified in 2020, really keeping them engaged because it was a really hard year. And as most of you know, being a technician is more of a boots on the ground kind of thing versus versus now this web version that we are now having to do due to COVID-19. Also, create more fitting stations in underserved areas. We are definitely making a stride towards this, but we are working hard to do that. Increase data entry quantity and quality. As I said, helping Adele with that clean data before it even gets to Adele. Also, more technicians to register in the NDCF. That's all I had prepared. So I do feel like we'll probably have lots of questions. So I will go ahead and pass this over to Denise so she can close this out and have some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I just have to add, whether you've been doing this for just a little while or a long time, I mean, it is really very significant that we have over 100K data at our fingertips, able to use now. It's just hard to believe, but over the years, we never had that sort of access. We would occasionally get a report. It never had as much as 100K. And to think that we have it so close to real time in clean data is really outstanding. And I think Adele just mentioned that even we just got our November data uploaded. So that is, you know, well, maybe November seems like a while ago, but really it is very current to have that sort of data available to us, clean, that we can access statistics and even pull statistics. Is just pretty incredibly impressive and useful for us. So congratulations to the NDCF team and to all CPSTs who've been adopting this and using it. So a lot of really good questions have come in, and some of them have to do with filling out the form, some have to do with data analysis, but I want to start with some of the questions that were for Jennifer, because it's really cool that we are able to share what states are doing. A lot of people have interest in the whole specialist program. Not every state does it that way. And so people wanted to know a lot of things about that, including, you know, who employs the CPS specialists, how are they paid, are they volunteers?
Yeah.
And then how do they get those car seats that so impressively are getting distributed? Who pays for those?
Yeah, absolutely. So the state uses the NHTSA funds to employ our child passenger safety team. We are part-time employees that don't have any benefits, but that's okay. So we are able to work up to 20 hours a week doing the specialist program. And then also the car seats are distributed by drop shipment. So they are, we did make a change now that our trauma hospitals do get where they are actually reimbursed through a different way, but we drop ship the seats. So that's why the NDCF is so important, because we can look and see if they are actually using that amount of seats and are able to drop ship those seats.
So can I ask a question though? Because,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, I do a lot of shipping at Safe Ride News, but I don't actually, what does drop ship even mean?
Sure. So they don't have to fill out anything. We just send the seats directly to them. So we use the state funds and so we currently are using Even Flow just through the state contracting. So they are contracted through the state, and we just place the order with Even Flow, and that just drop ships right to that station.
So the NDCF is absolutely key in this, because it's going to trigger for you when they need that drop shipment to happen. And it takes away a lot of, I assume, a lot of administrative work that someone formerly had to do manually, right?
Well, and it takes a lot of seats sitting in storage. And that is probably one of the biggest Indiana not complaints, I don't want to use the word complaints, but kind of a change as the fitting stations, because we're so used to such a backlog of car seats in the closet. Well, the NDCF has created us to be able to be more real time. And so we are using more, with a more real time with our inventory.
That's great, because we know not only do car seats expire, they take up a bit of space when they're sitting around.
Absolutely, they take care. Yes, take definitely a bit of space.
Awesome. So I'm sure you put your contact information. So there are a few states that do the specialist program, and it's it's just interesting to learn, because every state gets these kinds of funds. It's just up to them how to decide.
Absolutely,
that's how they want to use it, right? Okay, cool. So moving on to some questions. So we have, of course, Adele is here, and as well as some other panelists who will be able to probably pipe in. And by the way, many of the questions were answered. If you go to the answers tab, I think you'll see some of those. But I kind of want to make sure that everybody hears some of these questions. So right at the very beginning, Adele, you've done some analysis to make sure that what we're getting, the data we're getting, is actually representative of people across the country. But it got a little confusing, and we got a few questions about if we aren't gathering personal information, including race information, how are you? Can you kind of go over that again? And this is one of the reasons I'm glad we've recorded this, because there are some things I want to re-listen to.
Yes,
but you can tell us more.
Yes, so that's I believe that's slide 16 of my presentation, which is NDCF and census data. And I think something that gets glossed over is, to be clear, so thank you very much for the question, Denise, because there were a few questions on this, so I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. The NDCF does not collect race information, race or ethnicity information. Jennifer can give you the official stance on that and why we do that, but we don't collect it. So in order to assess coverage of all the different races and ethnicities, what we have to do is pull in the census data. So that's where that American Community Survey data comes in. So basically, I was giving you the race breakdowns of counties where we have NDCF checks. So I'm not trying to link a specific NDCF check to a specific, this family must be from this type of background or anything like that. It's just collectively for all of these counties where we see NDCF checks, this is the breakdown according to the American Community Survey from the Census Bureau. Does that help clarify that?
Yeah, and I think that probably you'd say, well, it gives us some idea, but we still could dig deeper. And I think Jennifer put into the answers, just like any other personally identifying information, it's entirely up to any program who's interested in gathering that to have a sign-in sheet that can be linked to your, so there you can have it. We do that too. In my program, we aren't currently gathering the race information, but we have other information that it goes beyond the NDCF, and we just handle it by a separate form, which I should add, a sample version is on the car seat check CPSTform.org website. So if you want to, that I started from that form myself and just modified it to the way I wanted it for my program.
Yeah, and we are hoping to even do better work on our level. You know, like we can look at the county level, we can also look at zip codes because we do have those, and really try to get a better picture of the, you know, drill down a little deeper, like you said, Denise, on the areas of the country where we are covering, we do have NDCF checks, and areas that we might be missing, and what that composition and demographic information looks like, and how we start to reach those communities. That is on the wish list of analysis. As soon as we have the resources available to do that.
Yeah, and we're moving along where, you know, you get certain things done, and then we get to where we can start looking at some of those additional things, which is great. And so other questions had to do with how to fill out the form itself. And I think this is one of those areas where I think that the form has improved so much, it makes it a lot easier. We have a lot of skip patterns that are useful. But one of the questions that came up a few times had to do with, well, what if the car seat isn't installed? Well, we have that option. You click that and then it won't ask you how it was installed because it's not installed. But you do still have to say what kind of car seat it is. And the options are general, right? They're like rear facing with a harness, forward facing with a harness, things like that. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't installed, but it's useful in different ways. Someone even asked about rotating. Well, how do you know which way they were? Do you just find out how they were going to use it and fill it in that way?
Yes. Our goal with that question is to figure out how this car seat was installed and in use. So for a 3-in-1, if it is installed rear facing with harnesses, then that would be considered a rear facing convertible in our world. The reason we do that is to have these nice clean categories of how to identify the misuse. You saw in a lot of my slides, we're looking at it that way. And if we had that 3-in-1 category, that doesn't give you a lot of information, you know, intrinsically about, okay, well, rear facing, I know these are younger children, these are, you know, new, like just understanding, okay, rear facing is, we're doing better with installs. There's these forward facing. And immediately, I'm sure when I say forward facing, you guys are picturing children, you know, ages 3 to 7, maybe, hopefully. And you can start to think about, okay, next time I see a family like that come in, what am I going to talk to them about? What am I going to do? The 3-in-1, because it encompasses so many people, it makes those misuse breakdowns a lot more complicated to draw out. So we definitely recommend, if you do need to track the 3-in-1s, you can document that in your doc boxes to make that clear with whatever detail you need, or as Denise indicated, these auxiliary forms that you can link to your car seat checks and then reference that later.
Right.
We also, and I did see, I think Jennifer suggested that that participant go into Redmine, into the carseatcheckform.org and make that suggestion. And I did get an email that has that suggestion. So it's now on our list to talk about at our NDCF weekly meetings.
Right, because we're hearing somebody wants that. You're explaining a good reason from one side that we didn't do it, but usually there's a compromise maybe. So it's great to hear that, because we don't want to make extra work for people in the field if they have to have that information to report somewhere else. And you know, maybe there's a way we can figure it out. So always good. So when Adele says Redmine, that's going to the carseatcheckform.org website, and then under contact us, you can really easily put in information and give that feedback.
Right. And we literally, the NDCF program team meets every week, and we literally go through email by email, and we discuss and we debate and we try to figure out how to implement as many of those changes as we can. So it's now on the list. So thank you.
So I just am reading a new question that came in, which I'm going to make sure we get to also, but I just want to make sure there was an earlier question and it probably got answered, but I am curious for you to describe how, if many families come with one car seat and 2 cars. So those are 2 forms, because there's, you know, you have to fill it out separate, because you can do multiple children on one form, but multiple cars have multiple forms. So the question has to do with how it might skew the data at all in terms of how many people we're serving if they make the same mistakes in multiple cars, and that would that get you know, marked twice.
Right. And kind of my initial response was, well, we've at least now got 2 different parents, right? We are, you know, rather than just, you know, I don't know if this is still the case, but when I would do them, you'd have dad wouldn't have the kids, mom would be at home watching the kids, so I only got to interact with one of the caregivers for a given child in that vehicle. So obviously 2 vehicles, you're now getting both caregivers or whatever, multiple caregivers from a single family to talk to. So that is, in my mind, that counts as larger outreach. And also different vehicles, different installation challenges. So we could see, even with the same type of seat, we could see a different install error, but maybe not. So point is taken. We have not looked at counts of the number of, same caregiver family with multiple vehicles. So that is definitely something I made a note about, and we'll look into it. I don't honestly know what the numbers. I suspect it's not a huge percentage of all the seat checks we see. I think a lot of families do send one vehicle, with one caregiver, and then kind of translate that to the other vehicles, but we can find out. So I'm definitely going to follow up and look into that.
So I'm trying, so Tracy, I know, is a super user. She has an observation that a question that is under the seat on arrival, which I think she's describing the car seats installed per manufacturer's instructions. So it looks like that's number 20 on the, I'm trying to find it here. She's saying a lot of people get it confused by that one. So maybe you can talk about that. The question she has is like, why do we have it? What's it used for? And if, how could we, maybe I would follow up with, well, how can it not be as confusing perhaps? And I will add something to put in red mine.
Yeah, and I am going to hand this one off to Jennifer, because I do believe, Jennifer, this did come out in our recent update, October, and I believe, did we make an edit to the user guide to clarify some of this?
Right, so that question, yeah, go ahead.
I misspoke. I think it's number 21 that she's saying car seat installed per manufacturer's instructions. Okay.
Sure.
Installed.
So this question we've had since the beginning, and it really is a catch-all question, so that when you're looking through your data and trying to just get a quick snapshot of, was there any misuse with the car seat? Was it installed per manufacturer's car seat manufacturer's instructions? If you see any misuse, then you're going to select no on that answer. So it's kind of a summary. So then as a proxy, as an instructor, if you are looking back through the form to verify the information, you can look at that question. You can identify that, yep, there was misuse, go back through and see where that misuse was.
And I think Marla is following up with that. Does that mean it's including harness issues?
It's the, oh, right. So this is the installation of the seat, how it was installed in the vehicle. So let me just jump over here. Car seat installed per manufacturer's instructions. So this is actually how it was installed in the vehicle. So if you were using the seat belt and the lower anchors and the manufacturer didn't allow you to do that, but the caregiver was, then we would mark no. And then again, this would be a catch-all question to identify any of those installation errors.
So the catch-all questions for manufacturer's instructions include whether it's faced the right direction, whether it's installed correctly, and whether the child's height, weight, and age were correct per the instructions.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
So a couple questions. Well, one question is for Jennifer, wanting to know how 1,200 techs managed to do 27,000 digital forms. That I think has to do with multiple years, right? Right. Okay.
I'll let, yeah.
Yes, Indiana was one of our early adopters.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get myself unmuted.
There
Yes.
you go.
So yes, that is over multiple years, over 2018 to 2022. So that's the most current data when our data analysis person pulled all the information. Yes. So that is how, and we, like I said, we mandated it. If they wanted to receive funding from the state office, they had to use the NDCF. So there's no if and buts.
Right. So the other question from the same person, I think it's Lucinda, said, oh, actually, I think the question moved over to answered online, but the question had to do with whether I think the idea of that was, could the form be made customized to your group's needs?
John.
I don't know if that was an Adele question or a Jennifer question.
I think
What
you
you
handle
can-
that one.
Yeah. So what you can change on the form is the liability statement. So if your agency has a specific liability statement that you are required to use or would like to use, we can customize the form for you, the paper form, as well as our digital platforms. And we can also brand the paper form. As far as making any changes to the questions on the form, it's a standardized form and we're not able to do that. But again, if you have specific questions and feedback that you'd like to share with us that might be helpful to other technicians across the US, please feel free to share that with us. That's how we come up with the updates and the changes to the NDCF. It's really built by technicians for technicians, and we take your feedback seriously. And as Adele said, we review that on a weekly basis and make those updates. So I think the biggest thing to remember is that this is a form used nationally. And while we've done our best to try to accommodate as many different types of programs like distribution programs, hospital in-room checks, our traditional seat checks, if you will, at a car seat check event. We've tried to work through as many of those different types of scenarios as we could. And Denise and the data committee, the National Child Passenger Safety Board, have been instrumental in helping us work through those different scenarios, along with feedback from many of you that are on the call today, utilizing that contact us report feedback form. So if you have ideas or suggestions, we encourage you to just send that in to us.
And Jennifer Rubin also asked and thank you for making the custom agency waivers. When there are updates to the form, like we're now in the 7.0, will those automatically get sent out to people who have the custom, or they have to add them themselves?
So if you sent in your customized liability statement and it's already in the system, when we update the NDCF on an annual basis, Joe and team from Tennessee Tech will email you the newest version of your form. So you'll just want to be looking for the form. You should be using version 7.0 right now. And then when we update it in October, it'll probably bump up to 8.0. But right now you should be on version 7.0. Your liability statement should be in there. When you select your agency from the drop-down menu, you'll then have the option to select agency English or agency Spanish for your liability statement, and that'll automatically be updated for you.
And Katrina wants to know how many vehicle manufacturers. A lot of the car seat manufacturers are looking at the data. Are the vehicle manufacturers also looking at data?
We do have some car seat vehicle manufacturers that are also looking at the NDCF data as well. So it's exciting to see what they're going to be able to do with this, especially when we look at those incompatibilities. And I know, Adele, you can attest to this. Early on, when we added the incompatibility question to the form, we simply just asked, was the car seat compatible with the vehicle? And it was a yes or no. And at the end of the year, 37% of the car seats were marked as not compatible, but that's all we had. We didn't have any other follow-up information. And so we worked real closely with the car seat and vehicle manufacturers to come up with a list of potential incompatibilities or issues that the caregiver might encounter when installing that car seat in the vehicle. And so those car seat manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers do take a look at that data. So again, that could be what drives change in the field for us, whether it's car seat design or changes in instruction manuals and assisting caregivers in eliminating some of those errors.
So it was definitely one of the reasons that I was, finally, I believed in it before, but I really, it takes a bit to make that transition. Although I got to tell you, it wasn't as nearly as difficult to do as I worried it would be. But knowing that the things I wanted the manufacturers to know were automatically going to them was a big reason that it was worth it. So thank you so much, everybody. I really remember that everybody on this panel is open to answering your questions going forward. And as Marla just noted, the NDCF is great at taking the feedback. So again, be sure to follow up with additional questions. I think, oh wait, we did get a couple more. Sorry. Do we have time? I think we have a little more time. We can answer these, right? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Will there be a point where the form will need to be reviewed to see if we can remove questions that are not getting useful data? So, wow. So Sid has been using this for a long time as well. And he's already got to the point where maybe we even pull, decide that some of the data isn't as necessary. Have you guys felt that you've come to that point yet, or are you thinking that more is enough?
So as you heard, I've worked at WSTAT for 24 years closely with statisticians, and statisticians will never turn away data. And Jennifer, I think Jennifer Bogue has been inducted into the statistician school of thought, which is data is always good. We want the data. We always want the data. So that's number one. From a statistical perspective, it never hurts to have a little bit more data, but we do understand the load on the technician to complete all of those fields and everything. The thing we now struggle with and debate in our weekly meetings is, well, what if there's one program out there, or 5 or 10 or 15 that are counting on that piece of data and we just tick it out of the form, So I think at this point, our goal with the whole program, and Jennifer, please jump in, is to reduce the number of changes from year to year. That helps us get a static data set, and that allows us the resources to do more digging and more sophisticated analysis on what we have. And also for technicians to get used to the form, the way it's laid out, and get very efficient at entering the information. So that's kind of our overall goal, to maybe not add too much and not take away too much in the future. But again, if there are big problems, things that are really just driving you and your teams crazy, go ahead and go to the website and let us know, and we will certainly discuss and consider it.
Absolutely.
With
Thanks,
that,
Adele.
Jennifer,
Yeah, and I was just going to jump in, and I know if, when you're looking at the paper form, if you're not used to using a form that's that extensive, please recognize that there are a lot of questions that have skip patterns built into them. So depending upon how you answer that question, you may be able to skip towards the end of the form. So while initially, and I think about that with new technicians, when they're looking at this form for the very first time, right? And you're seeing all of these questions and it can be a little bit daunting. Keep in mind that you may not have to answer half of those questions that are on the form. So that's something that we've worked real hard at over the last several years, is looking at those skip patterns and the machine logic that's built into it. And to Adele's point, deleting and removing questions is really not at the top of our list, but if we do evaluate those questions and look at, the usefulness, the benefits of those questions. And our hope is that at some point we will align with the updates to the national curriculum. And so then maybe we just update every 4 years instead of updating on an annual basis, because I feel like we have a really excellent product and we're in a really good place now. But keep your feedback coming. You are the ones that are using it on a daily basis, and we want to hear from you. We want to know what's working well for you. So please continue to share.
Yeah. And one other person asked about, the hard copy. Absolutely. If that is your, floaty, that I could definitely see where I'd want to fill it in hard copy and then put it, but notice it's just 2 pages. And like she mentioned, the skip patterns, that they're on here. So they're even on here, you can skip, but if you're doing it online, it's going to automatically skip you past. So to the earlier point, there are things that make it shorter than you'd think that it really is. So, all right. So again, thank you so much. I do have some final slides I want to go over, and don't hop off too soon, because I do have a kind of an exciting announcement in here. So there is some actual material you'll want to hear about. So first thing, of course, since you've just been in this webinar, perhaps you're interested in more webinars coming up. So we hope you can join us for the next one. It's in February. It's called Child Safety in the Skies. And this is pretty exciting. We're going to have this is from the National Child Passenger Safety Board, but our special guest will be Catherine Burnett from the Federal Aviation Administration. So we're going to get someone right from the FAA to do this free webinar worth 1 CEU. And so she's going to discuss the ways parents can enhance safety for their children when traveling in private or commercial aircraft. So to get to this one, just like what you did today for this one today, you go to cpsboard.org/webinars right there on the screen. So definitely encourage you to look at that. And then just also, because I know there's probably further questions, just a reminder for whether you're a technician, instructor, a CPS coordinator, a parent, or a caregiver, all these NDCF resources are available to you. You can visit the cpsboard.org for instructions and additional things to help you with this. You can also join the team for free orientation trainings that are going on. So you can register for a spot for one of those upcoming orientations by going to cpsboard.org/webinars. So I've definitely enjoyed a few of those. Those are really helpful, and you get more chances to ask your questions. But here's an exciting announcement as well. Have you heard that the Child Passenger Safety on School Buses National Training has been updated, but now we have a CPST version for an in-person offering, which is now available. So this is an update to the old 2015 CPS restraint systems on school bus national training, but it has been modified so that there is a CPST version that's only 5 hours. So instead of an 8-hour, you now get a 5 hours in length. And a hybrid offering of this CPST version is going to be available online for e-learning modules and then followed by in-person components coming this spring. So you're going to be actually, if you're interested, they're going to be the NSC is going to be sending out a call for field testers in the next week or so for this. There's still going to be a pupil transportation version that's going to be available later this spring. And that's going to have some of the stuff we don't need in there for CPST, some of the introductory information and crash dynamics and stuff like that, because for pupil transporters, they may not have all of that. They may not be CPST, so they're going to need some of that additional information. So the pupil transportation version will have both the in-person, the traditional format, but it's going to have a hybrid offering as well, but it will be 8 hours in length. So once it's released, all the e-learning modules are going to be available for individual completion in the Child Passenger Safety Learning Portal, which I hope you've been hearing about. That's carseateducation.org. Lots of great stuff there. Definitely get that one bookmarked, by the way. And you can visit cpsboard.org/school-bus. It's right there in the bottom corner for more information on that. So I'm super excited about that. And if you're interested in helping out the National Child Passenger Safety Board, all courses satisfying the community education requirement are going to be moving to the Child Passenger Safety Learning Portal soon. That's that carseateducation.org that I just mentioned. So they're moving those over, but they want to get the ones that have already been completed checked out. So they're in need of CPSTs to kind of review and test out those courses. So this is a great way to help out, but also, you know, earn your community education requirements or get people on your team to do so. So if you're interested in doing that, you can contact training@cpsboard.org to volunteer. So that's there up in the top left corner if you want to volunteer. Okay, so thank you. As a reminder, the webinar recording is going to be posted to cpsboard.org/recertification within 1 to 2 business days. I've said cpsboard.org a lot of times. I hope you're going there a lot because there is just a lot of great information there. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, the presentation qualifies, remember, for 1 CEU. And if you're still here, you also earned 1 community education credit as well. In order to earn both those credits, though, you need to have stayed on the webinar the whole time. And you're going to get an email with proof of attendance. So you have that for your records within 24 hours. So again, thank you so much for joining us today and have a safe day. And thanks for all you do in your life-saving education for communities. Bye-bye.